Spags, round one of the NFL draft is in the books, and we have plenty to discuss on the fantasy fallout front.
Yeah, we are going to go pick by pick today, discussing which of these players we think landed in the perfect spot. I can see the chat already talking about some of my personal bags, Pete, but let me give you a chance first, because I think we might have gotten some things right in terms of our pre-draft analysis, picking where we wanted guys to go. I think, too, some things perhaps didn't work out the way we wanted. I will point out Tyler Algier getting completely screwed by Bijan Robinson going in the 8th pick, but I think, honestly, screwing both guys over. But I'll give you the floor first. What things you think you got right? What things you think you got wrong? What were you surprised by?
Yeah, like I was right about some things in that I thought more than 3.5 wide receivers would go. That was the line. Although I was wrong, and I thought one of the teams like the Texans, the Packers, or the Patriots would take JSN earlier. And the Patriots ended up passing on him twice, so he slides all the way to the Seahawks. So I thought the NFL would value JSN a little higher than they did, so I got that wrong. I was correct in the Will Levis stuff all being smokescreen, and that CJ Stroud was still going to go ahead of him. Pretty big fall here for Will Levis, because I think even most people thought, hey, even if he doesn't go top 5, like some team's going to trade up, the Titans come get him at like 12 or something. So those were just a couple of ones there. And then some things just completely out of left field, right? I mean, the Jamir Gibbs pick, I don't think anyone saw that coming.
Yeah, the Jamir Gibbs one, certainly. Dan Campbell and I guess overall the Lions organization being raked over the coals for that one, but still a really good landing spot for Jamir Gibbs. So that's the kind of thing we're going to try to parse out today. Did you see some of the Will Levis rumors, by the way, that I guess there's a lot of reasons that perhaps he fell. Teams apparently thought he was arrogant in the meetings. I think Todd McShay said. Also, the banana and mayo and coffee stuff probably didn't help. But in general, it feels like teams just didn't like him as a person. And I didn't like him data-wise, so I'm okay with that. But it does feel like there's some hurdles to overcome. And maybe just like a QB desperate team like the Rams ends up taking them instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole how we thought about him, I mean, there was so much misinformation. He was kind of getting boosted up too by the S2 score stuff. I think people seem to like him a little bit more than that. People viewed him as a project. But yeah, it's so interesting though how the NFL kind of like picks and chooses like when a character flaw is a reason to move a guy down the board and when they're, decide not to. But maybe it was like you were saying, like the data wasn't great on him. And then if you combine that with him being cocky or not having the attitude or character that these teams want, then they're like, well, why are we going to deal with this? Like, we'll deal with a project if a guy has a quote unquote learning mindset or whatever, but they're like, screw this. If he has flaws and he's an asshole.
Yeah, definitely seems like that could be the case for Will Levis, but he's going to go in the second round, I think. I can't imagine him falling more than that, which with the physical tools that he has and all of that. But let's pull up the screen share here and let's go pick by pick, because I do think we need to hit on all these guys that are at least fantasy relevant. Obviously, Pete and I loosely aware of defenders and their value, like Will Anderson, great pick to trade up for. Jalen Carter seems like a nice value going to the Eagles. Pete, we don't care about that, though, so we'll focus on the offensive guys. Let's start with Bryce Young. He's the short guy going to the Panthers. It's been linked to them pretty much, not from day one, but I guess at least the last 2 weeks, if not 3. Seems like the markets have really much locked in on Bryce Young being that guy. I don't hate the spot for him. I do kind of think he's more of a gatekeeper QB, like a guy who's just going to kind of keep the ship running, keep things moving. I guess a game manager, if you want to use that language. But I think this defense is really the thing for the Panthers. So I don't love this landing spot for Bryce Young. I think he's got the weapons. I just don't think he's going to do a lot. Like, I feel like there's going to be a lot of 190 passing yards, 30 rushing yards kind of days for him. And fantasy wise, like, I don't think he's the number 1 fantasy pick for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I agree that I'm not excited about him in fantasy, although I don't think he has good weapons. Like, that's why I am not excited about it. I mean, both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, I was hoping the Texans would use a top pick on a wide receiver, and then you start to maybe get a little excited about some early fantasy potential. But I mean, there are just average, replacement level wide receivers in the Panthers. Like, there's no one who is going to really be a massive target earner or create and make the life easier for a quarterback. And so I think it's going to be rough sledding. I mean, the way Bryce Young gets there is he runs way more than we think, and he gets in a bunch of shootouts in a bad division. Like, that's maybe how he gets there. But yeah, I mean, when I think about BBM opening up, he feels like 16th, 17th round, like quarterback pick. He doesn't seem like someone you're really going out of your way as even like a 2 QB build type of thing.
Yeah, I don't hate the weapons as much as you do because I do think, I mean, on one of the stream drafts we did, I drafted CJ Stroud back when he was rumored to be possibly one of the Panthers guys. And I think he's the kind of guy that could create value for an offense, especially where you have DJ Chark out there going deep and, being able to spread the ball downfield. Terrace Marshall, I think, flashed pretty well, one of the highest EPA receivers in the league. Obviously, a bit less volume than a true alpha receiver, but I think enough potential there that with the right QB, you can get there. But I just think Bryce Young, the thing that teams like about him is he's not going to make you mistakes. He's not going to kill you that much. He's not going to force the ball downfield like a CJ Stroud does. So I'm just not that excited about him because I think the Panthers can be okay. Like I think they're kind of a potentially a 9-8 team that maybe could sneak into the South and win that with it being a much weaker division. But I just think fantasy wise, like we're talking about, he just doesn't have any of the archetype stuff. And we got now Stroud going high. We got Richardson going high. I would rather have those two guys by a pretty wide margin over Bryce Young.
Yes, I'm with you on that. I feel similar about Stroud though, as I do to Young as far as like year one fantasy prospects, but Richardson is in a different tier. Not only did he get the best situation, we now have basically zero concerns about him not starting day one. I like the weapons there. I think it's just going to be a recipe for fantasy success. We have a head coach who I think knows how to utilize them and is going to think very creatively about it. And so I'm going to be fine aggressively drafting Anthony Richardson. I mean, where do you ballpark this right now? I mean, I think his ADP settles in like the 10th round, although who knows, maybe the enthusiasm will get so frothy that he's up in like the 9th or 8th, but 10th round feels about right to me for Richardson.
In the most recent big board, I think I had him in my rankings as having a 144 ADP, I think. Hold on, let me just try to figure out where I have this here. Okay, so his most recent ADP in not super flex in the regular big board was a 150.4. I had him ranked at 138 because I felt like that was his ceiling pre-draft. I think now that we know his location, now that we know he's going top 5, now that we know the thing that I've loved for Anthony Richardson the most, and let's just skip him and let me pull him up the screen. Like, I think he should go. Where's the pocket that he goes ahead of? I think would be the question, but I think he goes top 100. I think he should, just based on the rushing potential, the fact that from day one, that's going to be there. And he has pass catchers. Like Michael Pittman's pretty good. Alec Pierce is kind of an archetypal guy that can get downfield and be big. I know I've made the joke about the white AJ Brown, but if he gets used with that same route tree, he's going to put up some stats. He's not going to put up AJ Brown stats, but he'll put up some kind of similar version of that. So I think Richardson's a top 100 pick, and I would have no issue doing that. And honestly, first 6 rounds you could talk me into just based on what I view his potential as.
Yeah, I'm looking at like the quarterbacks. So there's the tier where Dak, Daniel Jones, and Tua go. I think Richardson is now firmly in that next tier with Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, and Geno. Like if you want to put Richardson ahead of those guys or in that same cohort, I'm not going to take Richardson ahead of Tua. Obviously, if I'm taking Tua, I probably have an early Dolphin. But yeah, to me, that's about where he slides in, which is what? It's like directly on the QB1 fringe, like QB11, QB12. Like, and we obviously know he has upside to really outperform that draft cost too.
Yeah, I think you're right. It seems like Tua most recently had a 95 ADP in the regular big board. I think 95 to 100 feels pretty good for Richardson. And, some draft rooms, I think you might see him actually go. Honestly, the market, I think, will put him ahead of Tua, if I had to guess. I think he goes ahead of Tua. I think with how much people don't like Dak, I could see him going ahead of Dak, which would then put him in the top 85 range.
Yeah, and I do think his ADP, similar to what we've seen with Trey Lance and even Jalen Hurts in years before, like if these guys start catching steam, like once we start to get the positive training camp reports that Anthony Richardson is making strides as a thrower, his accuracy is improving, like drafters will incrementally push him up because that's going to ultimately be the only thing holding him back is people being like, what if he just absolutely sucks? What if he goes the way of Trey Lance? That'll give people a little pause. But if you eliminated those concerns, he would be going right in the Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence reign, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess, would we agree that this was the perfect landing spot for him? Like, I can't think of another one. I love the coaching. Like, we talked about this a lot because I think this is the one that I'd really locked in on saying this is for sure going to happen. And I was happy to see it actually happen. But like, this is platonically a guy who coached up Jalen Hurts. And that's what Shane Steichen is. Like, he is the guy that coached up Jalen Hurts, was his main guy. Sirianni's going to get some of the credit too, and he probably should get some. But I think this is like the most pure spot for Anthony Richardson to reach that Thanos potential he has of being this guy who can have all the Infinity Stones and dominate. And I think this is my favorite draft pick, I think, in any draft in the last 5 years that I've really been like paying attention on a professional level.
I hate to unilaterally agree with you, but yeah, I can't think of a better spot he could have gone. You could have come up with better teams, maybe better schemes, but then there would have been zero guarantee that he would start or, that he was going to redshirt. So to go to a place where we know he's going to start, has basically no competition, Gardner Minshew, like if Gardner Minshew is beating this guy out, then like we are in Trey Lance territory. We're in like Sam Bradford beating out Trey Lance territory. Like it's just done at that point. So I'm not too worried on that front. And like you said, the coach, the offense, everything about it is you can't come up with a better team for him to have landed at.
Yeah, so I think your Richardson stacks are going to be looking good. Richardson with Taylor, I would have no issue with as well because we saw last year, again, Hurts and Sanders both having tremendous touchdown outputs, and I think there's going to be a lot of those same fundamentals that are carry over. So Richardson, I know people want to bitch about the accuracy and all that. This guy can run the ball like a 38% avoided tackle rate at his size as a QB. It's just not something you see very often. So the chat's saying it, but I would say it too. When BBM4 opens tomorrow, which we're all very excited about, Pete will be doing a stream with Corain. Watch that, but like, you guys better be drafting Richardson. Everybody better be right now because there's no way the ADP is going to get lower from here.
No, it's not. There's going to be no unless like, there's an injury or they just say he's so far behind and Gardner Minshew's the locked and loaded. Honestly, maybe I kind of want that. Just can we get some maybe like cheap Richardson shares at some point? Because the worst case scenario for Richardson is like a Mariota Ritter light situation where Minshew plays 6 games and then they turn it over. Like that seems unlikely, but that also seems like the worst case scenario. And even then I'd be happy to tack on Anthony Richardson as like a 13th, 14th round pick as a backup with massive, massive upside.
Yep, I'm with you. So let's talk CJ Stroud because I think he's the guy that's gotten certainly the most fudded over the last week or so with the S2 things that Pete's talked a lot about and everybody, of course, on Twitter has talked even more about. He's also, I think, rebutted the claims, basically like saying he's not that smart. He's like, I'm not a test taker. I'm a quarterback, which, okay. I think nothing he shows in the field, though, like this isn't really a Jameis Winston kind of thing where I think Jameis got similar knocks for not being smart enough to be a QB. And, whatever his career has been, like, I don't think that was the main issue there. But Stroud is just so good at everything I look at in terms of the advanced analytics numbers. Sports Info Solutions EPA numbers have him being the best QB at every possible range where it's like short throws, he's the best. Mid-range throws, he's the best. Deep throws, he's the best. Doesn't run a lot, but can run, I think, in a Joe Burrow-y kind of way is the comp I've seen the most and the one that I see personally. So I like the spot for Stroud too. Like, I think right away he's going to gravitate towards John Mechie. I love that stack. And the Houston weapons aren't great. We'll see what they get in this draft here. Hopefully they can pick up maybe like a Tillman or somebody later, or I guess a Marvin Mims would be pretty exciting. But if this stack has any bodies in it at all, like I just think Stroud's going to create value. It's like this is actually a pretty good Stroud landing spot, even though that defense being improved, maybe he's not going to have to sling it quite as much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I just don't have a lot to get excited about. I'm looking at like the court here. Let me give you one. Do you prefer Jordan Love or Stroud?
I prefer Stroud.
Really? Stafford or Stroud?
Stroud.
Kyler Murray or Stroud?
Definitely Stroud.
Okay. Wow. You're way higher than me. How about Derek Carr or Stroud?
Carr, I think, just because I like the weapons more. And
all right, so I found like your point. I think I'm like 4 to 5 spots lower than you on him. Like I would put him in the Kenny Pickett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mac Jones tier for me as far as where I think he should go and what you could realistically expect. I mean, Spags, like the playmakers he has it's one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the entire league. We're looking at Robert Woods, Nico Collins. You mentioned Mechie. I'm hopeful that he bounces back, but man, there's not a lot of guys that are going to help him out a lot. And this is a guy who just came from playing with like 3 of the best wide receivers, college prospects of all time. Like there's going to be a steep, steep drop in the kind of help he has on the field.
So I think what's going to happen, and this is, me again, reading the tea leaves, because I talked about this a lot, like earlier in the offseason. I think coaching hires are really the thing that fantasy tends to miss the most. And this team, the Texans basically brought over the Niners staff. They have D'Amico Ryans as the head coach. That's going to help the defense. But also the passing game coordinator for the Niners is also, I think, their offensive coordinator now. And they've hired a couple of other underling coaches as well. But I think what this is going to be is CJ Stroud is going to play like Brock Purdy did down the end of last year, where they were letting him take those deep shots, letting him kind of do that stuff. But then, he's game managing in between that. I think that's what Stroud is going to be in this offense. And I agree the weapons aren't great, but I think he's just a guy where he's, throwing deep balls 13% of the time, which is a pretty high mark in the class, and crushing at that with a 0.93 EPA. He doesn't get sacked a lot. Like, he does all the things you're supposed to do to keep plays alive. So I think that alone is going to make the receivers look better. And I would say Stroud, to me, like, I get you ranking him where you would with those guys, where it's kind of like, show me it, and then you can go up a little bit next year. But I think if you get ahead of the curve and you take him ahead of like Mac Jones, Stroud could be really good just because of who he is as a player. Whereas Mac Jones is like, you need him to be a better player. You need that coaching staff to be improved enough to make him better as well for fantasy. I don't think that's going to happen. Where Stroud, I think it's like they're going to play from behind a lot. Like that's just going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think like two things can be true. Like Stroud can be a good quarterback. He can, help this team and yet still not be very exciting for fantasy. And this can even be true. This comment from Dustin who says, "Call me crazy, but I think Woods will be a target monster for Stroud." That could also be very true, but like Robert Woods is not leading us to explosive plays. He's not leading us to chunk, fantasy stuff. You're going to get, PPR death by 1,000 cuts. Maybe that's great for Robert Woods. I don't think that's great for CJ Stroud's fantasy value, right? We want to see quarterbacks running. We want to see a lot of points scored. We want to see deep passes to explosive wide receivers speeding up games. I don't see any of that with this version of the Texans offense, who I think we have to be honest with ourselves. They're going to establish the hell out of it with both Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. They're going to bring Stroud along slowly. And I just don't see a ton of fantasy goodness in this spot right now.
I just think you look at Stroud's profile, like he's incredibly accurate coming in. I think he had an 81% catchable ball rate according to SIS, which was just behind Jake Haener, Hendon Hooker, who had kind of a gimmicky offense. But that's like, one of the best marks in the class as well. And I think going to be up there with any of the rookies coming in the last few years as well, too. So he's got the natural tools where I don't think you need to bring him along slowly. They might play conservatively, but I think it's that Niners form of conservative where it's use the run to set up the pass kind of things. So I believe a lot in Stroud. I get having the doubt. I would still would you put him ahead of Bryce Young still though? Like are you on that page?
No, because I think Bryce Young's just a better quarterback. So I'll be drafting Bryce Young ahead of Stroud unless obviously I'm like, no, but I'm trying to think you wouldn't even have any stacking that would force you to prioritize, right? All of your Stroud stacks are going to be backdoor stacks.
Yeah, and super cheap, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Like you're getting a guy who's a pure passer with like weapons you can get in the 15th, 16th, 17th round. I mean, even Dalton Schultz is going there and he's going to be running a lot of routes at tight end. He's a viable tight end now. Like I think this is a pretty good outcome for him. I'm actually very happy with all the QB's landing spots because I think Bryce Young, even if I'm not a crazy believer in his upside, he got the best possible team. I think that's going to use him, intelligently and keep him in a good spot. I know our guy Nick was stumping for him being a smaller Mahomes, which I don't know if I see that, but still. But I think Stroud got a really good spot. Richardson got a good spot. And I think, the Niners coaching tree is going to be good for Stroud. So I'm on board with him, even though it seems like Pete perhaps is not. Who else do we have in the top? I guess we've talked enough about Richardson, so we can skip him. Bijan. So this is the one, Pete. I think this is a terrible situation.
You should go full screen. Everyone needs to see your cope in full screen here. Spags.
Okay, fine. So here's my official statement on Bijan Robinson's addition to the Falcons. I think it's a bad move for Bijan. I think it's a bad move for Tyler Algier. The thing that I think still makes Tyler Algier look good is he is now the lower drafted back who is pure leverage against this highly drafted back that is going to be in a timeshare. And Pete, I would say, and I'll bring you back on the screen for this one, I think the Falcons are going to run it 30 to 40 times a game. Like, I think that's what this is going to be, or, maybe short passes that kind of function as runs. I think there's room for both guys to get there, but I think people who've been drafting Bijan, and I've taken him too, but like taking him in the first round, this is a bad outcome because Tyler Algier was legitimately the best rookie back last year in terms of every advanced analytic and just dumb draft capital is how I feel about it too.
So I do agree with you on one point that the Falcons are going to run the hell out of the ball. I do not think Tyler Algier is any kind of impediment to Bijan Robinson's ceiling fantasy performance, like none. They can run the ball 35 times. Algier can get 10 carries in the same way other backs were getting some supplementary carries in that offense. But Bijan is going to get all the work he can handle. And the thing that sucks for Algier, unlike even say Michael Carter last year with the Breece Hall situation, is we were at least telling ourselves a story. Hey, Michael Carter will stay on the field in passing situations. Maybe they prefer him. There is nothing that Algier does better than Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is a much better pass catcher than him. And so it's basically going to be him spelling Bijan when he needs a breather. And can that still be a little fantasy relevant in an offense that's succeeding and running the ball a ton? Sure. And I think he's going to have really nice contingent value as one of the best handcuffs in football. But this is awful, awful, awful news for Tyler Algier. And Bijan Robinson is going to immediately eclipse him, Spags. And I need you to abandon this take like you needed to abandon the Drew Lock take, because I don't want this to sully your good name. You do a lot of good work, but you can't have take lock with this Tyler Algier stuff.
It's not take lock. It's that I think that he's going to be the Caleb Huntley last year, where Caleb Huntley was coming in. Like, I don't know how many touchdowns he scored offhand, but I think he scored 5 to 10 last year. Caleb Huntley did. I'll pull that up, but like, I think that's what this offense is going to be, is there's going to be 3 backs rotated in. I agree that Bijan gets the majority of the work. Like, I'm not arguing that at all, but I think what it could be, like, it's possible that Tyler Algier is a better goal line back. I also would push back on Tyler Algier being bad at pass catching too, because he actually was an outlier there. Just didn't get used as much because of Cordero, obviously. But I think there's room for these guys to get there. No, I guess Huntley only had 1 touchdown. Is that right? Felt like a lot more, didn't it?
Spags, for you to be correct about Algier, you're going to need Ritter to be really fucking good. You're going to need this offense because if they really improve as an offense and are a little bit more dynamic, they keep, offense or defenses guessing with, actual talent with Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Like, yes, then if the piece of the pie here, even if it's a smaller slice, if the pie is big, maybe Algier can eat, but I'm just not convinced that this is going to be a really dynamic offense, even though they have the pieces to do so.
I will just say formally, and I will continue drafting Tyler Algier. You will not stop me from drafting Tyler Algier.
Where are you taking it? Where do you think he should be valued, and where would you be willing to take him?
In terms of being a premium handcuff now for like a true bell cow back, and a guy who I think will still get work regardless and be in the mix, he shouldn't go top 100. I think that is now a mistake. He should go top 150, I think. I mean, maybe top 130.
I mean, he's a 16th, 17th round pick. That's what Tyler Algier is.
Oh, he shouldn't go that low because he's gonna get work.
Okay. So, I mean, Devin Singletary is going in the 15th, 16th round. If you want to put him next to Devin Singletary, you can. Anything higher than that is crazy.
I think I'm going through the rankings now to see where I would put him in. I mean, let's see where A-Chain goes. A-Chain had a 148.9 ADP.
Do veterans. It's too hard with rookies that don't have landing spots yet.
Okay, Mostert / Jeff Wilson, assuming they don't draft a rookie, I kind of think that's where Algier should go, and that's the 150-ish spot.
I'm not going to call you a lunatic in that range, because that's where you're looking at Gibson, Zeke, Kareem Hunt. I do prefer the Dolphins running backs to them, because both the Dolphins running backs, again, barring what happens in day 2, day 3, those guys have a much more immediate path to a role. To me, he's right in that Singletary, Jalen Warren, range around pick 170.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm looking at the rankings a little bit more. You got Tyjae Spears, Sean Tucker going, but we don't know where those guys are going to be. I think that's fair. I mean, I think Singletary is undervalued anyway. I think these guys all should be in the 150 range. But I would still take Algier. Like, the point being is that people are now going to completely not take him. I would buy the dip on that one, especially because it's a different tournament format we're going to have, and obviously a different tournament time capsule we're going to have. So I would take Algier in the 150s. But in the beginning, like, he's going to fall. He's going to be one of the biggest ADP fallers, I think, from those first few days of the draft.
Well, just naturally, right? Because his default ADP is going to be much, much higher. But I will be curious to see where people end up, pulling the trigger on him. And the running back board, the reason this exercise is actually kind of hard, right, is because so many of those picks from running back picks from like 140 to 170, like, these next 2 days are going to determine that in a big way. We're going to have guys jumping way up, rookies. We're going to have veterans sliding way down. But I think when the dust settles, he's going to be, a 15th, 16th round pick.
Also, can they trade Algier to KC to pair with Pacheco? Yeah, that'd be a great way for Tyler Algier to recover the value. But yeah, I think you're right. Mostly, like, I'll give you guys that. I just think that there's still value in him as a handcuff and a guy who's going to get touches from day one still. But Bijan clearly going to be the bell cow back. And do you think Bijan's ADP should fall a little bit? Because I kind of feel like it should come down somewhat, just knowing how Atlanta ran this running back room last year.
I mean, so what? His ADP in the big board non-super flex was, what was it at?
He was at 13.3 in the last big board.
Yeah, I think, to me, I'm going CMC, JT, Eckler. I'm still taking Bijan ahead of Barkley, but yeah, if you want to put Bijan and Barkley like mid second round picks, I'm good with pushing him back like 2 to 3 slots, but I don't think the market's going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I would think that Bijan and Barkley, and I've certainly made the case against Barkley enough on this show, but I think both those guys should come down a little bit here and probably fall behind some of the receivers. The Garrett Wilsons, Amon Ra's ADP is going to have to come up a little bit because of no Jamison Williams. Jalen Waddle, I think, is still a bit undervalued. So yeah, I would bump Bijan and Saquon back. We got to go to the next running back here. So this was the surprise of the draft that we talked about. Of course, some great defensive players and offensive linemen in this one. Jamir Gibbs, though, Pete, going to Detroit does seem like it portends the end of DeAndre Swift's time there. Rumors apparently that he's already being auctioned off on the trade block. So we'll see if he goes somewhere good or it goes somewhere, I guess, kind of good. Like the Bucks, I think, is still a team that looking for a running back too. But Jamir Gibbs, really nice landing spot going to Jared Goff, a guy who does love to check down, but is also not mobile enough to run for himself. We do know we have a big contract going David Montgomery's way, which feels a little bit odd because Montgomery was much better as a pass catcher than an actual runner last year. But it does seem like Gibbs will take that pass catching role, Pete. And I have no issue with it. Like, I think this is a nice pick for fantasy. Definitely a bad usage of draft capital for the Lions, but Gibbs is going to be a player from day one and going to be out there. And I have no issue with it, given that we're not going to have Swift anymore. And that's not an obstacle. No Jamal Williams. Like, there's a lot to go around that running back room.
Yeah, this is this was the fantasy bombshell of the evening. Just an egregious use of draft capital to I said this on Ship Chasing too. Like, if you're going to do a luxury pick here, which no one can argue that Jamir Gibbs, when you have DeAndre Swift and just spent a lot on David Montgomery, is anything but a luxury pick. Like, how do you not spend that luxury pick on JSN or whoever your wide receiver of choice there, Quentin Johnston, anybody there to help continue to boost that offense? This was an insane pick. I do really think Dan Campbell has lost the thread of sanity here. But to your point, this draft capital is meaningful. Jamir Gibbs is a really good prospect. This is a super fun offense. The one part that gives me a little pause of not just going full blast off mode on Gibbs is we have literally seen this play out with Swift, a smaller back, super explosive, can catch passes, and Dan Campbell stubbornly doesn't want to overload him with touches. And so if you want to make the argument that Jamir Gibbs is better than DeAndre Swift and is going to be more efficient or more explosive, I will buy that argument. But do we really think David Montgomery is going away? Do we really think David Montgomery isn't going to get the goal line touches? Unlike a guy like Bijan or even Breece Hall last year, who I thought could ascend right away to be a bell cow back, I think they're going to see Jamir Gibbs as a specialty back. And I have a hard time envisioning him getting over 15 touches a game in year one. And again, he can still pay off in fantasy. He can still be very usable, but I do think we have to come into this with open eyes and knowing David Montgomery is going to have a role on this team and he's going to do things for them that they're not going to ask Gibbs to do.
I think if anything, this kind of makes Montgomery even more solid with where he was going. And I was loving Montgomery in the drafts where he was still going behind DeAndre Swift. And I admit I've never been a big DeAndre Swift guy. Like, I saw the talent in the beginning, but I just kind of felt like the role wasn't necessarily matching up where the enthusiasm levels were in terms of drafting him. But I think that this is a really nice situation for Montgomery because he's now there's Jamir Gibbs literally can't get those goal line touches. Like, he can't get handed the ball and be expected to do anything with it. Maybe they can get him out, run some routes and whatever and catch passes in the red zone. But at the goal line, he can't run those plays. That's going to be all David Montgomery. And you could see David Montgomery put up 20 touchdowns this year just because of the fact that he's an actual sized human being and Gibbs is going to be way too tiny to make that kind of production.
Well, this is why this is so sick, right? Can't you just see it right now? Gibbs breaking off a 60-yard run, getting tackled by his shoelaces at the 2-yard line, and David Montgomery coming in and just doing the Jamal Williams thing and having 13 touchdowns because he just woke up at the 1-yard line. I do really feel like we're going to see the exact same movie as we did last year, except David Montgomery, and this takes a lot for me to admit, has a little bit more to his profile than Jamal Williams, can do a little bit more. And Gibbs is a souped up version of DeAndre Swift. So it's I feel like we're going to see, just Fast and Furious 2. It's just the same bullshit, just slightly more sparkly and exciting with more special effects.
And I would tune in to watch it, just like I would with Fast and the Furious. Bullock saying 8 to 9 carries and 5 to 6 targets per game for Gibbs. Demont smashing his face through the A-gap the rest of the time. I think it's more 5 to 7 carries and then 5 to 7 targets would be my thought. But I think he's probably a 10 touch back. It's just going to be, you're either hitting a home run or you are getting 1 PPR point and him maybe, falling down, maybe breaking 1 tackle and falling down.
So here's the question. Where do you think his ADP settled? Because we were drafting him, late 5th. Sometimes he would slip to the early 6th. And this situation, it's weird, right? Because the pros are you have draft capital and you have an offense that should be pretty good for fantasy. We got the Coors Field of the NFL here at Ford Field, lots of shootouts, lots of checkdowns probably from Jared Goff. On the other hand, You have DeAndre Swift, who's still there. I know he might get traded, but he is still there. And you have David Montgomery and a coach who has historically never liked to saddle up a back like this with a lot of touches. So do you think his ADP just stays fixed where it was thereafter? Do you see it moving up or down?
I think because of the enthusiasm for him, and I think the way that casual players will perceive it, where it's like, oh, he's the rookie coming in, they're going to treat him like a bell cow back. Like, I think that's going to keep him closer. He had a 60 ADP in the most recent big board. Montgomery had an 84.2. I think that should, I mean, it feels a little bit high for Montgomery, but it should almost be flipped. Like, I think Gibbs should be the lower one because he's going to have some spike weeks for sure, but Montgomery week to week, it's hard for me to see Montgomery not being a 20 touch back. And I don't think there's any chance that Gibbs could even come close to that.
Yeah. And again, a lot of this will get reshuffled, but Gibbs was going in a clear tier ahead of that kind of like muddied 7th and 8th round range that had Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins. And so in my heart of hearts, I feel like he should probably be a part of that tier. But man, when you look at the draft capital in this offense, and this is why my mind is in such a blender about this, because this pick tilts me so much and I think it was so bad. And yet I think about guys who can fucking win you weeks in the fantasy playoffs. And Jamir Gibbs is that guy. Jamir Gibbs has that profile. And I will be, at the very least, I will be matching the field on Gibbs regardless of where his ADP settles, unless it's like outrageous in like the 3rd round or something.
Yeah, I'd love to see him be cheaper, but I agree. I think you got to get your shares of Gibbs because he's in an offense that should be improved, in a division that's going to be worse as well. So lots of things working out in his favor. We are at the halfway point of the show, guys. So I do have to ask you guys to subscribe down below, hit the like button, leave a comment whether you're watching live or after the fact. We appreciate you tuning in a bunch here, but we are on the march to 2K subs, trying to grow this channel as best we can with just Pete and I putting in that elbow grease every single week here, every single show. So we appreciate it, but please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. And if you're watching afterwards, leave a comment down below. Pete, let's keep going here. Let's talk about the 20 spot. That is our next offensive player. JSN goes to the Seahawks. Interesting pick for him. Does feel like he kind of fits a role that the Seahawks don't have right now. Lockett, Metcalf, obviously stretching the field more, guys that have been certainly being taken or getting to take advantage of Geno really forcing that ball downfield, but they haven't had a kind of slot check down guy who can produce a little bit after the catch. So it's interesting. That said, it feels like he or Lockett has to move outside a little bit more, and I don't know that's going to be the best spot for either of them. So I don't love the fit, but he's the first receiver off the board. He's going to be out there. And he was great in college. So I think he fits all the criteria of a guy I should like. I just wish Tyler Lockett weren't there personally.
Yeah. So I think I'm excited about this landing spot, not necessarily just in a vacuum, but what I think it's going to do to his price. And, I've been lamenting recently that we're never going to get a Garrett Wilson situation again, where it's just like this guy who goes top 15 in the NFL draft, incredible prospect, is going in the fucking 12th round of drafts. It was just absurd. I was like, we're never going to get that again. We were drafting JSN in the early 5th before the big board. JSN is going to slide from that spot. People do not like this landing spot. They are going to naturally look at this offense. We're going to shrug at Geno Smith. We're going to say, hey, DK and Lockett are here. And we are going to get a very nice price on JSN. And unlike Gibbs, who I think I'll probably end up matching, I have a feeling I'm going to be way overweight JSN. I'm a JSN bull. I believe I would not be shocked. And maybe I'll just try this take on for size. I think he will, at least for the second half of the season, earn more targets per game than any other receiver in that offense. I think he is going to come into this league and crush. I think he's going to minimize Tyler Lockett's role. I think Tyler Lockett will still be used as a downfield threat, but I think JSN is a superstar. I think he's going to earn targets in due order, and I think he's going to be a fantasy monster, and I want as much of him as I can, and I think the market's going to give me a big discount because they're worried about this spot.
Also, it looks like there's a potential out for Lockett next year. So something I was thinking about was maybe I thought Lockett's contract might be ending. I think for Dynasty, Ross is just saying in the chat, like he's good for Dynasty and maybe a tough spot for best ball, even though you seem to be pretty bullish on that. I think this is a pretty good spot for them to get out of Lockett next year because they could save apparently a lot of money, take on some dead cap, but that seems like the out period. And then JSN will be right there. So Dynasty-wise, I think he pretty much should be locked into the same spot you would have had him pre-draft. But I agree. Like, I think he's a guy that's just a pure target earner. Like, he's going to certainly, I think, hurt Metcalf and Lockett a little bit just in terms of them not having the same volume you could expect. And I think Lockett especially, like Lockett's going to be, I just don't see you could play these guys both out of the slot and get them to have their full potential. So Lockett might have to move outside. And I just don't think that's the natural spot for him at his age and where he is in his career. But JSN just so good at every metric, getting really good in short targets and creating value in those spots. So I'm with you. Like JSN, I think is going to be undervalued. I just worry that this probably wasn't his platonic ideal spot. Like him with Stroud
No.
and on the Texans, I think would have been like his ideal spot.
And again, and the reason I'm excited about this is, say the Chargers took JSN. I mean, JSN's probably like a 4th round pick in Best Ball Mania if that happens. Like he's probably going like around right where Mike Williams was going in the DJ Moore territory. I really do think that was going to happen. And now I think he's going to slide more to where, say, Jalen Waddle went as a rookie, right? Where he's kind of like a 9th round pick, 8th, 9th round. He's going to be in like that Kadarius Toney range, maybe even a little lower than that if the market gets really spooked by this. And I am a big time buyer in that range.
Yep. And I think, he's going to be in a team that, Geno, for whatever the flaws may be, that, I think kind of showed in the back half of the season. That is a team that is willing to throw, willing to pass a good amount, has a good running back as well. So the game kind of makes sense for them to get the ball downfield and give Smith and Jigba some chances to actually make plays. So I think it's a good spot overall, but there are probably some better ones for him. Quentin Johnston is an interesting one because I did not see him linked with the Chargers anywhere. It seemed like they were linked a lot more to the Jalen Hyatts of the world, the speedsters in the draft that ended up going a little bit later. But this, Pete, we both have, I think, liked Johnston a little bit. You were more Team Addison, and we can talk about him next. But Johnston is a guy I've been drafting a lot of in the hopes that he might land in a Buffalo or Kansas City and fall a little bit more. But I think a new Chargers offense where he's the lone, not the lone big bodied guy, but now like a logical complement to Mike Williams on the outside and maybe a replacement for Mike Williams, I guess, in the future too. Great landing spot for him. And I think he's going to reach his potential in here. And I really believe too, Kellen Moore running this offense is going to be a big improvement. So this is really a good spot for Johnston, even if I do think one of the other AFC teams, one of these stalwarts like the Bills and Chiefs would have been a better one for him.
I would say of all the skill position players who went in the first round, we both agree that the Anthony Richardson to the Colts was just the perfect landing spot. I would say Johnston to the Chargers is the second best landing spot, just pure fit, team need, the quarterback situation. The comp I've had in my head, and I don't know if it was Pat who said this or Pat was referencing someone else saying this, but like a bigger version of Brandon Ayuk. And I think that's what we're going to get from him in this offense, right? Where he's never going to be the top target earner. That's going to be Keenan when he's healthy. Mike Williams is still going to get his, but this guy who can do more with it after the catch and really be a monster in that way. Like Quentin Johnston is going to have some of those games where he only has 4 or 5 points, but he's going to pop off for a few 25+ point games. And if those weeks come when they mean the most, that's going to be very, very valuable. So I like this landing spot a lot, and I think he perfectly fits what the Chargers need because you have Mike Williams, who truthfully is more used as just a downfield guy, Keenan over the middle. Now you get Quentin Johnston in the intermediary. I'm sure you can do some fucking fun shit with, end arounds and scheming touches for him. Just get him out in space, and teams aren't going to be able to fully account for him, when you have those other wide receivers there on the field. So I think this is perfect.
Yeah, the yards after catch is a big thing for Johnston. He had a 38% avoided tackle rate. So he and Richardson really stood out in those two metrics in terms of their positionality and just being able to really generate a lot of missed tackles off of that. But a guy, just yards after catch numbers, he was top in the class at receiver, 8.9 yards after catch. So he's going to create a lot of value. And I think too, obviously Mike Williams has had a high ceiling. And we talked about Keenan Allen, like he's coming back. He's going to get a ton of targets, I'm sure still. Quentin Johnston might have the highest ceiling of all their receivers. Like obviously Eckler's still got the God tier ceiling if he's going to be on the team, but Johnston, I think, might have a higher ceiling to Mike Williams just because, like you were saying, Pete, he can get 3 targets and turn those into 2 touchdowns just based on the avoided tackles.
Yeah, I made my dynasty video for Fantasy Life before the NFL draft, and one thing, and I was looking at some of Dwayne's research, and we were comping him to Mike Williams, but with yards after the catch ability. So it's like if he can be that, I think Mike Williams has shown a little bit better. And when you look at his downfield like contested catch rate, the Quentin Johnston, he was actually a little weak in that. But it's like, you have Mike Williams to do that. Get Quentin Johnston the ball in the intermediary and let him do stuff after the catch. I think it's just a perfect fit. And, I was battling you about Addison and Johnston before the draft. I think I am coming around on flipping those two now with this landing spot because Addison is capped. This was kind of what we were talking about with JSN. Does he have a path to being the top target earner on a team? I think so on the Seahawks. If he went or where Jordan Addison went, neither of those guys are cucking Justin Jefferson. Like full stop, Justin Jefferson is the guy. You're always going to be a complementary piece there. Where Quentin Johnston could emerge as the top alpha wide receiver in this offense. And so I think I am Johnston over Addison now with the landing spots baked in.
And I think like you were kind of saying too, Dustin, saying maybe Mike Williams could teach him how to high point a ball. Like that actually is a case where he's going to be learning from one of the best route runners in Keenan Allen, going to be learning from one of the best high point catchers in Mike Williams, best downfield guys. Like you got to think about that stuff too with this guy's growth. So dynasty wise, would you say dynasty wise that Johnston is the number one receiver in this class now?
No. JSN by far still my number one. Not even close.
I think Johnston with this landing spot, like I think he's more likely to have value year 2, year 3, year 4, and have a chance to be a real outlier. Whereas JSN, I agree, like he's going to come in, he's going to be 7 to 10 targets, but he's going to be that guy forever. I still think there's a chance that, Johnston could be more valuable long-term. So dynasty-wise, I would plant that flag that I think you could have the number one receiver in this class just by the inertia of landing in the spot with the best young QB as well, who's going to be there, with him every day, growing at the same rate. Zay Flowers coming up next year. So he is the third receiver off the board, goes just ahead of Jordan Addison. Flowers, Pete, was a guy that I never loved. I just don't love the size and kind of not great competition in college, but he is a burner. He is landing on the Ravens. I think for him, this is kind of a bad spot. Like you have Bateman there, you have Odell, you have Andrews, you have Likely, you have Lamar running a million times. Dobbins also, obviously, they're still going to want to run even with a new offense. I don't believe enough in Zay Flowers for him to overcome just what Baltimore is and what they already have. So I'm not in love with this spot for him, Pete, but do you feel differently?
No, I don't. But if I pull back, isn't this just Jahan Dotson all over again? Where it's like he gets that first round draft capital. He wasn't our favorite prospect. When you look in the analytics community, it seems like teams like this guy more than the numbers. He goes to a team where, yes, there's opportunity, but we don't think of them as having a really explosive passing offense. We have a hard time seeing the ceiling. We know at best he's probably the third target earner behind Andrews and Bateman. And so it's hard to get excited. And yet, I think that will be baked into his ADP. If he settles in the same range where Jahan Dotson was going last year in the 12th, 13th round, I'm probably a buyer at that price. Again, just blindly tailing the draft capital in the potential opportunity. As much as I love Rashad Bateman, there's a chance he just never stays healthy. There's a chance he never puts it all together. And Zay Flowers, could emerge as the main wide receiver weapon there. And we did see room in that offense for guys like Devin Duvernay to flash at times. And they were clearly always hunting for another wide receiver. So I do think there's room there. We do get Lamar Jackson back in the fold. So I'm not doing cartwheels about this, but I have a feeling Flowers is going to end up being a value in drafts.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I think you're right about the Dotson comp if we are just looking purely in a best ball level, or I guess best ball combined with the NFL draft capital thing. I have to kind of retrain my brain to draft Zay Flowers, because I would say where Zay Flowers is being drafted all throughout this process, Pete, I think that now that ADP looks bad. But I agree, if he starts to come down, like in Best Ball Mania, you now can stack him up. I think he makes more sense. But I think if you drafted him in the big board or the big board super flex, I just think that he went too high for what this landing spot is.
Yeah, but I'm approaching it from the other. The draft capital, I think, means so much and gives you such like a safety net to where you're taking them. And I think we sometimes get a little too fancy trying to say, hey, we are going to outsmart the NFL draft capital because we don't like this guy as much. When Lamar Jackson, a team that, we got AJ in the chat referencing the OC change as well, this regime, drafting him. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, not doing cartwheels, but I'm not going to be bearish on Zay Flowers. I think this is neutral at worst. And I think the market might double count this being a bad spot.
Bullock asking, Zay also feels like he could be a spike week player with his big playability. Does have the second highest avoided tackle rate of the receivers in the class at 32%. So he wasn't a great target earner. So I don't expect him to have the value just because of the fact that he was only getting 28% targets per route run at Boston College. So I don't expect that to go up in the NFL. But I think you could see 5 targets to him and he breaks one of those for a touchdown, or 2 of them for a touchdown, because he is that fast as well. But yeah, I think there's definitely spike week upside, but definitely not a player that I'm most excited about. But you are the Jordan Addison whisperer, even though he did go, of course, to my precious USC. I kind of soured on him early in the draft process just because the numbers weren't as good as they were at Pitt. And also the fact that, a little bit smaller, bad athletic comps, all that stuff. But a pretty good landing spot for him, Pete, going to Minnesota, I guess, with Kirk Cousins' long-term future kind of not seeming likely to be on the team past this year with the contract stuff. It does feel like they still need to solve that, obviously. But he's going to learn from another kind of undersized guy who's one of the best at his position in Justin Jefferson, can vacate some targets there with Adam Thielen gone. And we saw KJ Osborne have huge upside last year. So I think he's a good best ball player right now, Pete, Jordan Addison is, in this Vikings offense. And I don't mind him, but I do think that, obviously Justin Jefferson's number one. And it's going to be hard for him to really get a meaningful share.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see where his ADP settles. I think this is not a great landing spot just because there's no path to him being the top target earner. But like you said, we saw Osborne succeed down the field. I think Addison is much, much better than Osborne. We've also seen games where, teams have sold out now to shut down Justin Jefferson, and Addison is going to really be able to thrive. Not to mention, TJ Hawkinson's emergence too. So, I mean, Addison is not going to be the focus of opposing defenses. And I think he has the talent to capitalize, and he has a quarterback who can find him too. You're not worried about him getting kind of lost in the shuffle of a bad offense. Vikings find their way in a ton of shootouts. They continue to not, really take their defense that seriously. I know they have a new defensive coordinator this year, but I don't know. I like this spot. And if he settles in that same range that, the Dotson and Garrett Wilson were going last year in the 12th, 13th round, I'm going to be a big buyer there. I think about it structurally too. That's generally a spot I'm taking running back flyers. But if you do the Pat Kerrane approved double anchor RB start, and you are needing to grab some wide receivers in that range, I think Addison is going to be a nice pick. I love the idea of double stacks with Kirk Cousins, either Jefferson and Hawkinson paired with Addison. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff here, and he's going to be, I think, a priority target for me in early drafts.
Do you think he kind of completely kills KJ Osborne, or does he just make him like only leverage for best ball kind of player?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think this should push Osborne more back to 17th, 18th round, last start. Like, we know Osborne can still pop off for 70 yards in a time, but there's lots of players who can do that at the end of the draft. Osborne can be our generation's KJ Hamler, I guess.
Yeah, Osborne closed at a 110.8 ADP, and Pete, the Spags rankings, which of course, what does it stand for, Pete?
What? I'm literally asking you. I never remember.
Superior players in great spots available on Football Outsiders. I had him at 130. I feel like 130 maybe goes to 150 now for KJ Osborne. I would still draft him in cousin stacks, especially if you get scooped on Addison, or I guess maybe Addison or TJ Hawkinson, because it's hard to forget that Osborne ceiling that he showed at the end of last year. But I agree. Like, I think that ceiling kind of now goes to Addison's way. And then you still have the Thielen production to replace as well. So maybe they both can get there, but it does feel like it's hard to imagine Osborne, Jefferson, and Addison getting there in a major way with the kind of ceilings that they all are capable of.
Well, and not to mention Hawkinson. I mean, Hawkinson was a man possessed down the stretch too. So yeah, I think Addison is a hashtag better in best ball pick, right? Because he's never going to have a target share in that offense where you just feel great about starting him week in and week out, but he's going to pop off for some big weeks this year. And so that firmly puts him on the best ball radar.
All right, so we got, it looks like, just the last rookie here on the board, a man that I've stumped for the most, who ends up being the only tight end taken off the board. Let's talk about that fast. Are you surprised Michael Mayer didn't go? Because he is a guy that's been touted for literal years by NFL prospect boards. Like, it's not quite Brock Bowers here. The guy's going to probably go very highly when he comes out, presumably next year. But I think that I was surprised that Dalton Kincaid went, and I love Kincaid, but I was surprised he went and Mayer didn't, because Mayer to me made sense for a lot of these teams here, especially like the Bengals at the back half. Were you as shocked as I was? Because I really thought Mayer was going to be going, like, he and Kincaid, I thought were the sure things to go in the first round.
Yeah, I was surprised. Although it kind of tracked, right? There was this parallel sentiment of both like the dynasty and fantasy community, and apparently the NFL evaluators too, that just got bored with Michael Mayer. Like, he was just like perfectly adequate across the board. And then when he didn't crush the combine, everyone's like, well, there's these more exciting guys there. I prefer Michael Mayer over Kincaid. I'm like a little worried with, Dalton Kincaid, as old as he is. We didn't get any reliable testing numbers from him. Everyone who watches the tape just says they have like a transcendent viewing experience. So kudos to all of you guys grinding Dalton Kincaid and tape and having a revelatory experience. I have not watched any of the tape. So I'm just kind of like, why, I guess, over a guy like Mayer, or just even waiting right until the second round, grabbing a guy like Laporta, Kuntz, one of these other more athletic guys. So I'm with you. I think Mayer probably should have been the first pick off the board.
Yeah, so I do like Kincaid, though, and I would say, Pete, if you want to do like one pseudo homework assignment, just look up Dalton Kincaid USC highlights. It'll probably be like a 5-minute video.
Okay.
He absolutely killed USC. Like, I had he over 200 yards against us. It was terrible, but he was like electric in that game in a way that he then played that second game against USC with like his fractured back or whatever. That's been part of the reason he didn't do the workouts. And he played that game, and they were still double covering him, knowing he was injured, knowing he was still like not able to do that. And he still had an okay day, but basically then served up, as a decoy for all the other guys, and they had a big day. but Kincaid is so good. So I don't love the landing spot. Like I like Buffalo as an offense, obviously, but Dawson Knox has been a safety blanket for Josh Allen now for years. And even with other tight ends that they've liked and gotten into the mix a little bit more that occasionally siphon a touchdown away, like the Quentin Morrises, the Tommy Sweeneys, and those guys, like Kincaid, I don't think has enough upside. They just don't target the tight end enough. And I think too, Dawson Knox being there is going to hurt him too. So I like that he's in a high-powered offense, and I think that's probably good for him to be good for the next 4 or 5 years. But man, like it's tough to see him and Knox getting there, and I just don't see it working out the way that's going to be the best for fantasy.
Yeah. Again, I know I keep saying this. I'll be curious to see where his ADP settles. But I think the Bills continue to be just like a very fun team for stacking, right? Because there's so many. It's like every other round in the draft, there's another Bill that you could tack on to your Josh Allen stack. So I do want to bet on Kincaid, being better than Knox. I assume the market will want to bet on that as well. But where do we slot Kincaid? Like I guess, people were pushing up Okonkwo to levels that I was like vaguely uncomfortable with. I'm guessing Dalton Kincaid is even going ahead of Chig with this landing spot. I mean, don't you think he's between like Chig and Pat Freiermuth, like an 11th or 12th round pick for most of BBM?
Yeah, I think that feels about right to me. I mean, Dawson Knox had a 128 ADP. So he should kind of be in that range, I guess. And Chig was at 138. So maybe he settles in a little bit behind Chig because, Knox has to come down too, right?
Yeah. Knox feels more like he falls into the Mike Gesicki range, like 15th, 16th round tight end.
See, I don't know that you should put Knox behind King. Like, I think I get why people will. I don't think you should put Knox behind Kincaid just because, I mean, he is coming off a fractured back. Like that could be part of why they feel comfortable, maybe not using him a ton this year, and still having Knox out there. I think both guys should go in like the 160 range. Feels about right to me, just because they have the same opportunity, but like Knox,
you're gonna have zero. You're gonna have zero Kincaid if that's where you think he should be valued, because he's gonna go much higher than that.
God, I have so much of him in the big board, so like I do want him to have a positive outcome, but I really don't think tight end was the move for them. I think they needed like a Quentin Johnston type, or maybe they'll get a receiver in the next few rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people are just going to get excited, right? You combine a first-round rookie on one of the best fantasy offenses in football paired with Josh Allen. Like, you're not getting a discount on this guy.
Also, we do have some reports in the chat. Casey had posted a few minutes ago about Antonio Brown says he's going to Baltimore, but I guess Baltimore has not confirmed this yet. But he's saying that he's going to sign with the Steelers or with the Ravens, Pete, which doesn't he have like legal issues right now? Like, isn't there like a lot of that? It doesn't seem likely.
Yeah, he was literally just in the news for, I believe it was the child support stuff. But yes, he tweeted out a photo of him in a Ravens jersey. I think we we almost just need to be done with Antonio Brown and giving him attention, I think.
Yeah, it seems like he's really taken a turn for the worst overall in ways that sometimes our favorite public figures do these days. But yeah,
I haven't seen one legitimate reporter mention this.
So we'll see if it comes from like Ravens PR at some point. I think then we can start to worry about it a little bit more. For now, it feels like more maniacal ramblings. Like he probably FaceTimed with Lamar and is like, "This is it, I'm in." And, that is probably not.
He's like, Lamar hangs up and then he goes, "Dude, do you mind if I say I'm going to sign with you?" And it's just like the dial tone. He's like, "All right, I'm blasting it out."
Lamar's just like Truz, and then just off, and that's it. Round 2 coming up today. I guess anything particularly exciting you're looking forward to? I think the run on tight ends will be an interesting one to see, because I still think Darnell Washington going to a Cowboys or Lions would be pretty good. Michael Mayer still being out there I think is pretty interesting. Will Levis we talked about. I'm glad that we didn't take Will Levis a lot, because I really feel like his chances of starting day 1 are much lower. But what are you looking forward to here in day 2, and I guess for day 3 tomorrow too?
Yeah, the chat, someone mentioned it too, that Michael Mayer might get a better landing spot now as well. Like if we get him to the Bengals or the Cowboys or even the Lions, I think that'll be very fun. Obviously, very interested to see where Will Levis and Hendon Hooker go. I imagine both of them will go in round 2 here. The running backs, I think, are the most interesting, right? Because I think we're going to see Zach Charbonnet and then probably one of these other guys that we didn't really know how to properly rank, maybe go in the first 15 to 20 picks here. of the second round. And I think that's going to be really interesting for fantasy. And then, obviously these wide receivers too. Is it, Cedric Tillman? Is it Mims? Is it Jalen Hyatt? Where do these guys go? Where do they, I guess, how about this to put it back on you? Because obviously some of these running backs can become very big fantasy targets depending on where they go. Is there a landing spot for, let's say, anyone who hasn't been drafted that's a wide receiver right now that would cause them to jump, say, Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison in ADP?
I got it. Okay, that's a good question. I think Josh Downs going somewhere good could maybe do that. Jalen Hyatt going to Buffalo, like one of these guys going to Buffalo, I think would do it. So like Hyatt, Mims, Tillman going to Buffalo and being that outside receiver that it feels like they need, I think could do that. Mims going somewhere exciting. Where does Mims have to go?
Like Chiefs. I mean, that's the easy one. Yeah.
Yeah. Mims. I mean, anybody to the Chiefs would look pretty good, I think, for sure. But I think Mims is probably most live. If we were going to say, like, out of all the guys who could jump somebody, I think it's got to be Mims or Hyatt going to a high-powered offense, and that could probably jump them ahead of Flowers and Addison.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's high-powered offense, and they have to go, top half of round 2. So the draft capital is enough there. My guess, though, is it's still, I think Zay and Addison are going to end up being better picks, even though people will naturally get excited about whoever got paired with the top quarterbacks.
I mean, look, if Mims goes to Kansas City, I would make an argument that he should be the top rookie taken off the board.
Oh, come on. That's too much. You can't take him over.
Mims playing in that offense and being one of the only guys who could play outside, and he's small, but like we know that Kansas City knows how to make small outside receivers work. I would be really excited about that. I don't know. I wouldn't take him like that. Like the ADPs wouldn't line up, so I wouldn't have to do it. But I would really start to plant my flags for Mims even more. Like I think Mims' team got to be a little heavy for me towards the end of the super flex drafts, but he's talented. Like he's getting hyped for a reason, where some of these guys, kind of get hyped just because people are talking about him.
Again, it'd be the same movie. Taking, Mims over JSN, Mims on the Chiefs over JSN would be like what we did last year, taking Sky Moore on the Chiefs over Garrett Wilson. Like it would be the same fucking thing all over again.
Exactly.
Target hog, just took the words out of my mouth.
Personally, but yeah, I think he's better than Sky Moore. We'll find out though. Pete, give the plugs here because you got, of course, your newsletter came out today, the PO box. I was reading it before here talking about some of the best ball arguments, but you got a lot of content going on, so give the people the plugs.
Yeah, just two simple ones. Saturday night, I've been doing like the best ball after dark streams for YouTube members, but then Underdog has made it known that the contest is going to open up sometime Saturday evening. I assume we'll be safe with a 9 p.m. start. So I'm flexing best ball after dark to just a BBM opening night kickoff stream. So I'll rip a few drafts with Karain. I'm going to be making an announcement today about my Best Ball Mania streaming plans. I guess I can spoil it here. And it is my goal, Spags, is to stream every single one of my Best Ball Mania 4 drafts. And if I'm behind or whatever, then I just can't max it. But basically, I will not do any slow drafts, any private Best Ball Mania 4 drafts. If I do a Best Ball Mania 4 draft, it will be documented somewhere, perhaps here on Splash Play, on my channel, on Fantasy Life, on a guest stream, but it must be documented. That's what I'm committing to this year. And then my only other plug, I did release my video, The Anatomy of a $1 Million Lineup, on the Deposit Kingdom YouTube page. Spent a lot of time working on that, have gotten some good feedback, and it's reviewing Pat's lineup, of course, and then the team that won the regular season Millie last year. And I think with all of the conversation now about the new prize structure with BBM4, you'll find it very interesting thinking about, hey, how do I optimize for regular season? How do I optimize for the playoffs? So I would appreciate you guys all checking that out.
It's a good video. I like the video footage too of King Capital and Pat talking about their lineups. Definitely a unique take there to get access to those guys. So check out Pete's video. I think I'm going to be on Stochastic tonight doing their round 2 NFL stuff at 8 p.m. with Neil Orfield and Isaiah, though I haven't gotten confirmation on the production link. So if I'm not there, then don't watch it. If I am there, then watch it. And of course, check out Football Outsiders. Been a rough couple of weeks here, getting some great media hits recently in Defector. Loving that, but no, just support us there because it is still a staff. We're trying to make things work, trying to do the best we can to keep things afloat. So please go check that out. And I will have a column about the draft stuff coming out probably early next week as well. But that's a lot of fun. And actually one announcement for me too. I've decided, Pete, because your idea was so good, I kind of thought, what's an angle for me? We are going to have the Spags solo streams coming back in a few weeks here on the channel. And what I'm going to do, Pete, is I'm going to go into each draft attempting to stack a specific team is what I'm going to do.
I
So
like
that way I'll get all of my stacks. People can headhunt me if they want, but I feel like this way, at least there's some kind of utility to each video to exist.
So hang on. First of all, I love this. I've thought about this kind of stuff too. Like so give me an example. So if you say I'm going to do a Seahawks stack, and if you just get brutally sniped on like Lockett and Metcalf and JSN, you're still doing like Noah Fant and whatever fourth wide receiver I'm forgetting right now is basically what you're going to do.
Yeah, so basically just forcing it in a way that's not going to be great because people know my intentions going in, but I'm hoping there's a way to do it. And if nothing else, then it'll be 32 drafts that I eat less than positive EV teams, I guess, out of it. But I think it's just a way because like people want to see how the stacks work, and I think enough people are interested in stacks and like in just how to do them. So I don't know, it's worth a shot.
I like it. And we kind of did a few of these last year. I guess I would call them like soft randomizer stuff, right? Where we'd be like, you have to draft a 0 RB team. And the thing I like about it is, yes, if you can do it without sacrificing too much ADP value, I think it does in the same way correlating week 17 leads to natural diversification. I think some of these like little challenges or prompts actually lead you to different pockets of the draft and different textures to teams than when you just robotically draft over and over, which I've definitely been guilty of. So both from a content play and from just diversifying your exposures, I actually really like that idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that because we're trying to think of unique ways to make this fun. Obviously, we love doing the drafts on the channel, so a lot more of that to come. Follow Pete at Peter Overzet. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow this show at Splash Play Pod, and of course, subscribe. Hit the like button before you go. Any final words here, Pete, as I stumble over to the exit outro?
No, appreciate you guys hanging out. And if you do really want just like shit show entertainment, I do think I would never say a live draft stream was evergreen, but I do believe last night's ship chasing stream, of which Chris Spags appeared on, but was commandeered by drunken Ben Gretsch. I do legitimately just recommend watching it. Multiple people have already told me they rewatched the entire thing already this morning, and I'm going to get some highlight clips made here as well.
Yeah, I actually need to rewatch it too because I saw some of the stuff on social media and I passed out at like 11 o'clock because I was drank too much. So I was just done. And I woke up at 2:30. Was like, oh, I wonder what those last few picks were. But then I saw the Gretsch stuff. I was like, I got to watch that now. And I'm going to probably do an hour streaming of watching that after the fact. But is Gretsch doing okay today? Would be the big question a lot of people had.
Yeah, he was kicking around in the ship chasing Discord. His first post this morning, and I will read it verbatim. Okay, today at 10:48 a.m., he said, guys, followed by, I woke up on my office floor at 3 a.m. with the lights on. So he has emerged, and shout out Benjamin Gretsch for a tour de force performance last night.
Yeah, if you want to see a man drunkenly holding drinks up, putting on football helmets, really whatever the audience requested or the staff requested at any point, go check that out. And we'll be back with you guys again very soon. Enjoy your weekends. Enjoy the rest of the NFL draft. And good luck in whatever you're doing. See you guys soon. Bye.